Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to the spoiler review episode here on the Hollywood Critics Association YouTube channel for the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 5, or should we call it the Book of the Mandalorian? Continuing that saga here for Episode 5. We're excited to be here live with you all. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who are joining us later, thank you very much as well. We appreciate it badly. Make sure you hit a like on this video as we're going along and leave a comment down below. Let's introduce ourselves before we jump into things. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host on my own outlet at the Outlaw Nation. Laura Sirikul there wearing her Mandalorian helmet. How's it going, Laura? Tell everybody where they can find you.
Good. Can you guys hear me? I want to make sure it's very the Mandalorian.
You sound like yeah.
It's my Mandalorian voice. No, you can find me on El Circle, but I'm a writer for a whole bunch of places like the Nerds of Color and Nerdist and a whole bunch of places. So that's where I'm from. But yes, I'm also found on Tatooine now with Boba Fett.
A third member of our foursome here is Maggie Lovitt. Maggie, please give people your introduction.
Hello, you can find me on Twitter at Maggie of the Town. I have a link tree in my bio for all of my various pursuits. I'm the managing editor of entertainment over at Wealth of Geeks, and I am a news editor over at Collider, where I do reviews of the Book of Boba Fett every week, including today.
That's right. Later on, she will have a review up on Collider.com. And my brother in life there, Dan Murrell. Dan, please tell people where they can find you and what you got going on, my man.
Oh, so much going on. youtube.com/Dan Murrell Movies. I watched Boba Fett at like 5 a.m. after watching 5 Sundance movies yesterday. I'm a little punchy is what I'm saying, but it's all good because we're watching great things and we're talking about it and we're having a good time, and ain't life great when you can do that. Absolutely, for sure. I'm in the same boat. Woke up at 12:30 in the morning to watch this thing. I didn't go to bed till 2:30 because there was so much to kind of explore and investigate and go through with this. And we're going to break it all down here. We're going to spoil it. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. It's up there on Disney Plus. Then come on back and hang out with us so we can keep your view for sure. And any comments, any good comments that I see here in the chat, I will bring them up if you're watching us live for sure. And maybe we'll jump into a quick discussion about them if it's a good comment. But let's start here. First of all, it's called the Return of the Mandalorian. And I wasn't sure how we were going to start this episode. I thought, you heard the sound cue at the end of the last episode. I thought, oh, they're just teasing this. It says the gathering storm. So that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to get gathered just yet. But wow, did I not expect them to have a full, essentially Mandalorian episode. I mean, I came for a Book of Boba Fett episode, and a Mandalorian episode broke out in this one. Pretty incredible. Let's get overall thoughts to start off with. Dan, I'll go to you first. Overall thoughts on this one, man. I love how you started with me.
Yeah.
Listen, as a piece of Star Wars, as a little slice of Star Wars, as the first episode of season 3 of The Mandalorian, I thought it was really, really good because I love The Mandalorian. Right. And that's what this was. This was an episode of The Mandalorian. Yeah. So if you kind of chop off the title of the show and just show that to me, I really, really liked it. But I think if you recall, if you roll the tape back on last week when we were talking about this and everyone's pitched like, what if we got into the space and Boba Fett and Mandalorian and the dark saber? I was like, well, I feel like if we get into that stuff, we're really kind of losing focus on what the show is. Well, shocker. That's sort of where I feel about the show in general, which is it was half flashback, half present day. Now it's one whole episode is not even to do with our main character. So I feel like this was a great chapter of the Star Wars universe, but it sort of continues to show me that maybe the picture was a little muddled on what exactly this show was going to be. So I think it reflects well on Star Wars, but it doesn't reflect so well on the Book of Boba Fett, the concept of the show as a whole. But having said that, Bryce Dallas Howard rocked it in the director's chair. Yes. Some great action. I love where they took the Mandalorian. I didn't expect to see this much of him until season 3 of his own show. And, so in a vacuum, really enjoyable stuff, more big picture stuff that I had an issue with.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that for sure as we go along. Laura, you were the most excited that jumping onto this. You got your helmet. You ready to go. Talk to me about your feelings about this episode 5 here of the Book of Boba Fett.
No, totally. I like Dan, like last week, I was like, you know what? I want to wait. I want Boba Fett to grow. I want it to evolve its own, and then all the other characters can come in. Well, and then when I saw the Mandalorian in the episode, I was just like, "F all that." I'm like, my Mando's back. But at the same time, like, okay, so the episode in general, like Dan said, the Mandalorian, it was a great The Mandalorian episode, and I was so excited to see him. I thought it would be half the episode, and so it was great because I was like, "Oh my god, this is great! We get to refresh and then see how he gets to Boba Fett." But then when it kept going, I began to have some reservations where I'm like, this is a great Mandalorian episode. But then the part of me was like, what about the Book of Boba Fett? Like, this is kind of crashing in on his story and his thing, because I know this is what they finished filming way long ago, but it felt like I feel like people are going to be like, see, the Mando is better. See, that's why they decided to bring him in. And I'm going to hate that excuse that people are going to start doing that. People are going to be like, see, it's because like they use that as an excuse against Boba Fett, because they're like, oh, they had to bring the Mando. But this was filmed way long ago. So they finished this way before even Boba Fett came out. So I'm hoping that people understand that and that it's part of the storyline. But at the same time, I just felt like it took away from Boba Fett's story for me a little bit, because I'm like, okay, when is Boba Fett going to happen? Because it's drawing the attention. It's kind of like having the big guest star take away from the main character. And I kind of am like, So overall, I loved the episode for what it was. It was a lot of fan service, a lot of prequel stuff. But I had reservations because it was part of the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I mean, Maggie, you've got Peli Motto in this. You've got Phantom Menace references all over this. Naboo references, that N1 starfighter. You've got Paz Vizsla. You've got the armor. You've got so many of the characters from The Mandalorian that pop up in this. So do you feel the same way as well, that this is a little bit taking away from the status of the Book of Boba Fett, that although this was an awesome episode, the fact that we didn't even see Boba Fett is kind of a shock here. Do you think this does a disservice to the show, or do you think this is just a great little kind of palate cleanser before we get into these last two episodes that are going to take us right to the end of this first season?
I think that I'm very cautiously optimistic. I'm also a big fan of watching serialized television shows, like all the Law and Orders, all the Chicagos. Like, I watch all of those, and I've seen a lot of those crossover events. And sometimes the main characters in a show do take a backseat to their own series when they reintroduce characters from another TV series. Right. And so I feel like that's kind of what happened here. Like, here's a catch up on what's been going on with Mando, where he's been since the last time we saw him, and then next week we'll kind of dive back into the Book of Boba Fett. But like, this episode felt like it served as that refresher. And maybe I'm cautiously optimistic in the fact that we learned a lot about Mandalorians. We learned a lot about Mandalore. We learned a lot of stuff that we most likely know because we've probably seen, the Clone Wars. We've probably read Wikipedia a few times to like refresh. But the general audience doesn't know all of the stuff. They don't know about the tragedy. They don't know about Concordia. They don't know about any of this stuff. So this introduced a lot of stuff, which ultimately does benefit Boba Fett because he is a Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. We know that his father's history. We know all of this, but we've never really seen that in connection to him. So I'm hoping that they'll tie that through, bring it full circle, and that all of this will benefit whatever claim that he also has as a Mandalorian to maybe find more of that muscle and pull in those other, because I'm sure there's other Mandalorians that aren't the Armorer and Paz, who have their very intense preconceived notions of what being Mandalorian is. But yeah, I have a lot of hope. I really enjoyed it. I didn't realize how much I missed Mando until he walked through that butcher curtain, and I was like, I literally cried, and it was really embarrassing. I was glad I was completely alone. Yeah. But yeah, I think I'm more cautiously optimistic than most people on social media right now. I think it works.
Well, I'll say this. I love the episode. But I take your points absolutely. This was absolutely an episode of The Mandalorian. There's no 100%. Doubt about it. This is an episode of The Mandalorian. You got to have some more time with him. This is probably the most relaxed Din Djarin we've ever seen. Certainly, just that whole sequence with him having to get onto a commercial air freighter, which could have played terribly, I thought played really well. A lot of the beats that they've been trying with the Book of Boba Fett throughout the entire series were used here in this episode, and they worked under the Mandalorian structure for some reason. And Dan's right, Bryce Dallas Howard, phenomenal job directing. I think this is better than the episode she directed in season 2 and in season 1. she's getting better episode per episode to the point where you're like, this, you should just start directing feature films already. It's
Give her a
fantastic.
movie.
Yeah, what
They
she was
hired the
doing-
wrong Howard, John. They hired the wrong Howard. back,
They really did.
You might be right, brother. You
Can we
might
get
be
we
right.
can get Solo too, but this is directed by
Yeah, right.
Yes,
directed
Bryce
by
Dallas
her.
Howard. Yes.
It's a completely different approach. But that being said, I think also Disney looked at it this way. Not everyone watches The Mandalorian. So in a
That's true.
way, this episode with all the exposition, all the stuff here, maybe this was their way of introducing The Mandalorian to people who haven't seen The Mandalorian, but are Boba Fett fans, and it kind of going backwards and making, okay, now you got a taste of The Mandalorian. Here's 2 seasons you can catch up on. So I totally understand the approach, but I agree. I would have liked to have seen Boba. Would have liked to have seen them come together in some way. Although I enjoyed the Fennec Shan back and forth, which was nice. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more for sure. But I totally
was
get
so
how it can
happy.
be undercutting in comparison to the Boba Fett. Go ahead. Sorry, what?
No, I was like, she was so happy.
Yeah.
I was like the happiest I've seen Fennec Shan.
Again, the most relaxed episode of the Book of Boba Fett.
Is it Bryce? Does she bring some sort of like natural ease to set? Because if you even look back at her other episodes in season 1 and season 2, the most relaxed the characters were ever.
Yeah. You might
Because
be right.
Sorgan, like the Den episode for Sorgan, he was so like relaxed and chilling, having a good time. Like
Could be.
Anything with Amy Sedaris, I think it's a relaxed set. I think she brings so much levity and so much like coolness to the scenes. Like even when they're not filming, it's like she's just gonna crack jokes. So I feel like she brought a lot of relaxing persona to the set.
I just want to see Pelimoto's Tinder when she's swiping right on the Jawa. I want to see that. All right, let's discuss the Klatooinian scene here as we start off. This is Boba Fett. Oh, sorry, this is the Mandalorian. Hey, this is the Mandalorian walking in, and we see these creatures, these dog-like creatures that were, of course, teased in that scene that we had last week around that dinner table, talking all this kind of stuff. So he walks through this butcher curtain. Again, these are real-world things that we all have seen in movies or seen in our lives, depending on what class field trips we took. And this idea that a Mandalorian is walking through, as Maggie said, a butcher curtain, and then confronting these and then cutting them all down using the dark saber. It was so badass to see him use the dark saber. Maggie, talk to me about this. Took them all to town and then sliced Hobie in half and then took his head, walked out, told the rest of his crew, hey, let me walk out. Y'all can have New Republic credits. And true to form, they ran out, got the money, and he walked out. What did you think about this as an opening for this episode?
it was so good. I also thought it was funny considering so many people have been like, the Book of Boba Fett's not violent enough. And then here we have 5 a.m. Din just cutting people in half. I loved that he sliced himself in the process.
Yes.
Brought me so much joy because I know if I was handed an actual lightsaber, I'd be missing like a toe by the end of it.
Oh, yeah. Most
so
relatable I've ever felt with Din is that's how I would be.
I understand you. But I thought the fight was fantastic. The choreography was great. Obviously, Lateef Crowder underneath the helmet doing all of that badassery. I thought it was great. I thought the tension worked really well. I love the whole, that's not me. That doesn't even look like me. I'll let him know when he shows up. Like, okay. I thought that was a great scene, a really fun way to reintroduce us to Mando.
Yeah.
And also not give too much away for like where his mental state was at the point. I thought was really good. So we kind of learn more as we get reintroduced to the covert and all of that. I just thought that the pacing was great. And it, even if I didn't know going into it that it was Bryce Dallas Howard, it just felt like her because they're just the angles that she uses. She's a genius.
Yeah. Well, and the irony here that they use the same line that they used in episode 1. I can take you in warm or I can take you in cold. You know, Laura, what did you think about this as an intro to the Mandalorian for people who may not have seen the Mandalorian, but also as an intro to this episode in the Book of Boba Fett?
I thought like just the scene and you see the dark saber, he used it, and even through the meat curtain when like everyone's watching him.
Oh yeah.
You see that dark saber. I was freaking out like at midnight screaming. I'm hoping I didn't wake up anyone in my home. And I was just so happy to see him, and I think it's because I missed him so much, but also like I remember how we were all saying like Boba Fett, we want to see him more brutal, we want to see him like the Godfather kind of type of situation because he needs to get respect and ownership of his as a daimyo. I feel like Din is brutal, and I think that's what we are missing from the Boba Fett Book of Boba Fett. Even though I'm hoping that we see that from Boba, and I feel like, oh my god, I feel like that's what a lot of people are gonna see this and reflect on that, like, oh, this guy's brutal. He actually kills and all that stuff, and but it felt nice to see him again, and just to see him use the dark saber, and also just like he didn't be himself, like as a bounty hunter. And I'm hoping that's gonna, but I'm worried, and I'm happy and worried. Happy that I got to see that and just got to see his evolution, but also worried that people are gonna be like, see, that's the brutality we wanted from Boba Fett. So that's my only concern.
Fair enough. Dan, you talk about feeling a connection to Din Djarin in this way with how he uses the dark saber. Were you surprised that they went ahead and first just full on had the Mandalorian, and then second?
Sorry about that.
And then second, had him get injured and made that connection and a kind of a way to introduce him back into people's minds. What did you think about this?
I mean, I love that there's a design on some things that's so good that it's the same across time and galaxies, which is the curtain in a butcher shop. I mean, it's the perfect design. Did
you want to see Rocky punching some meat? Did you want to see a
Oh yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's I'd love to see the Venn diagram of people that watch the Book of Boba Fett but not the Mandalorian. That's a very interesting choice. But I'm sure that there are people that are just like, I don't care. Boba Fett, huh? Where? Like Han, Boba Fett, where? Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, this was, as far as Mando goes, this picked up right where season 2 left off, and so I like the fact that you're basically seeing life after Grogu, more or less. And I know some people thought about, well, are we going to see a kinder, gentler Mando now that he's gone through this experience? No, he's a bounty hunter, of course not. And so the great thing about a lightsaber is that it cauterizes wounds, so you can be so brutal to people, and then you don't have to splash blood everywhere, and the show takes advantage of that. But as a reintroduction to the Mandalorian, of course, I mean, it's the I word that Hal Rudnick used to love over on Screen Junkies when I was there. It's iconic. It's an iconic moment for the character on another character's TV show.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. All right. As he gets out of there, we go over to discuss with the Boba, the armor, and Pazwa. We got a lot of info about how their sex survived here, because we saw him go and return the head. He speaks to some kind of eagle-looking species creature, trying to negotiate initially about the money, about like getting information and what have you. And then eventually, when he threatens to leave with the head of the Klatooinian, finally he gets that information. It leads him down through his infrared sensors to this area where the armorer is at, where Paz Vizsla is at. And then we get a lot of info, as I said, about how their sex survived, where they were at during the Great Purge, and the history of Bo-Katan. A lot of exposition here for people, as Dan said, in the small Venn diagram, who have not seen The Mandalorian or Clone Wars, but only coming on to Star Wars through the Book of Boba Fett. We also had the armorer forge Grogu a gift from the Beskar spear that Ahsoka gave Mando. She also the armorer also trains him in how to use the dark saber. He must work with the blade, not against it. And then Paz Vizsla challenges Mando for the dark saber, is bested, but then Mando reveals that he did remove his helmet to the armorer, and now he must purify himself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. No, it's in the waters, living waters beneath the mines of Mandalore. Laura, talk to me about this moment. What did you think about these scenes together, this whole section of the show, getting a little bit more of the information, also getting some information you probably already knew, but her forging this for Grogu, her training him, Paz Vizsla challenging him, and then her, in essence, telling him he needs to go and do some purification in mines that may be destroyed on the planet Mandalore.
Yeah, I'll be really quick because I know. But yeah, it was an amazing exposition scene. Like, I love that we got the history. It was kind of a refresher for people because it's been a while since The Mandalorian, and it's great to see the armorer, because we were concerned for her well-being. Everyone's like, where is she? We know she escaped. We want to make sure she's okay. We love her. But it was just great to have that like history being told for a lot of people who probably didn't know, or like, because there's a lot of people who just watched the live action stuff, and so this was a great like overview of everything that was happening, and it was a great overview of refresher too for people who haven't seen The Mandalorian forever. For me, I'm like, oh, I know he had the dark saber, but it's great. It's a great refresher of the history. And so I felt like it was a great scene what they did, because it also tells you what happened to the rest of the Mandalorians after they escaped. So it made me feel relaxed, like knowing that they're okay, like these people, they're building their sect again to have foundlings and everything. So I felt it was beautifully done. The fighting scenes were amazing. I like again, Bryce Dallas Howard, amazing. Just everything. The the choreography, the fight choreography, amazing. Like it was just everything I wanted from the Mandalorian, just the history based stuff. But yeah, that's how I felt. I just felt like it was just great to see them again. It's a great history lesson and just a great scene in general.
Yeah, Dan, your thoughts on this? Because I had a little bit towards the end here where I was feeling like, is the Mandalorian maybe walking away from this sect? Is the armor asking too much? This feels very cult-like. She's certainly very defensive about how they survived. And there's incredible visuals during this section. Bryce Dallas Howard, I mean, that shot that's very Terminator-esque with those Imperial droids and the other droids walking and looking for survivors was mind-blowing. Seeing those Imperial ships coming through and dropping all those bombs, the Night of 1,000 Tears, and then seeing Paz Vizsla take him on. They took off their jetpacks, so that was a fair fight in a way. What did you think about all of this as you were watching it? Or were you a little bit bored because it's exposition you'd already seen already?
But I am one of those folks of which Laura was speaking, in that I have not seen the animated shows.
Oh, right.
And I needed that because otherwise I would have been very lost. Because I'm not well versed in dark saber lore. I'm not well versed in Bo-Katan outside of the live action show. So that was very useful for folks like me who have not yet entered that arena of the Star Wars universe. And yeah, I mean, that whole sequence was so well done. The just the look of Mandalore being completely decimated by the Imperial forces. I mean, honestly, I think this was sort of like Thor and the Magic Hot Tub in Age of Ultron, where this much better executed. But I think that this to me was like next season on The Mandalorian. Setting up like what he's doing, this idea of a quest for redemption, and I that's one of the reasons I kind of wish that they had figured out how to structure this differently, because Boba Fett being expelled from basically being told he's not a Mandalorian, that is a huge moment for this character, and it's sort of a character beat inside this one episode where they have to do all this catch up. So I hope that they revisit the consequences of this in the next season. But yeah, for me, the whole thing about going to Mandalore and getting to the mine and everything, that sounds to me like where we're going to be following Din in season 3 of his own show.
Yeah, it seems like we're. I mean, I may be wrong on this, Maggie, but it seems like the connections are cracking a little bit. The requirements, the demands. Eventually, you realize if you're in a sect or a cult or whatever, that this is a little too far. Ironically, once you get out into the world and live a little bit more, you start to see that maybe these rigid ways of living aren't the best ways of living. And I wonder if Dan's correct that we're being teased stuff that we're going to be seeing in the next season, including issues with Bo-Katan. Talking about how the end of her reign was in tragedy, how they lost their way and we lost our world. So setting up a kind of adversarial approach to these two sections of Mandalorians here in this world. Ironically, Bo-Katan always taking off her helmet. Boba always taking off his helmet. These Mandalorians not. So what do you think about all this section here and the fight between Paz Vizsla and Mando?
It brings me so much joy. So I have always viewed Mandalorian as it very much simulates the structure of Christianity and a lot of the weird cults and very intense groups of it. And so this whole thing with Din has been about his unlearning of the things that he has been kind of stuck into as a cult. And that's a lot of why he's very naive and he doesn't really understand the ways of the world because he's been kept isolated. And I saw people this morning who were saying oh, he backslid. This is terrible character development that he went back to the covert. And I'm like, of course he did. He lost his ship. He lost his family. He took off his helmet and had a huge crisis of faith. Of course, he would go back to the source that provided him with that structure. And he had to be kicked out of that in order for him to figure out who he is. He had to have that final door closed. And I thought it was interesting and kind of confirmation because I love world religion. That's something I studied in anthropology, and just the idea that they even borrowed from the idea that in order to rejoin, you have to basically be baptized in the waters of Mandalore. You have to go dip. It's very clear, these through lines. And I love when Star Wars pulls some things that's very recognizable in modern society that you can then kind of pull into. And I think that there's so much potential for Den realizing that he can't go back now and he has to figure out who he is as a Mandalorian. And it would be great if we get some of that with him going and working for Boba now and doing this task and seeing that there's like things that you can do after you finish being a bounty hunter. And you can make a new path for yourself as a Mandalorian and not like hold so rigidly to these structures that aren't working. There's 2 of them left. I mean, like, how many people are going to want to like become foundlings of that unless they kidnap some kids real fast? Yeah. There's a lot to that I think can hopefully be explored in the Mandalorian season 3, and I hope that we get some of it with Boba as well, because obviously we had that big scene in season 2 with Bo-Katan being like, "You're not a Mandalorian." Even though pot called kettle black. Be like, which one of these 2 people actually helped with the destruction of the Mandalorians?
Right.
It was not that person. So I love the Mandalorians. I think it probably just like tickles my anthropology brain of like the way that cultures work and the borrowing from different organizations. And it just brings me so much joy. I love this section. This was everything I dreamed of for Mando.
Yeah, and Paz calls him an apostate, which is a person who renounces a religious or political belief or principle. And Maggie, you just recently graduated with a degree in anthropology, so congratulations. So tell us more about the apostate. Why this was kind of a throwaway line, but it was a dig. It was a hard dig at him, essentially saying you're excommunicated, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly what they were saying. Like, you're no longer in Mandalorian, you're apostate, like all of these things to drive him away. Yeah. And I think it just, there's so much potential in that, because I think that had we not had this scene, there was always going to be some lingering thought that he could go back.
Right.
And now that is finally, like, it feels like a clean break. And I also just don't feel like where he is as a character now that he would have lasted pretty long in that covert anyways, because there's already so much stuff that seemed to be going on with like melt down your Beskar, back to that collective, whereas he's very much an individual. And I also thought it was really interesting that the moment where he's like, I want to go back and see Grogu, and she's like, well, that's tough because Jedis don't have attachments, which is in complete opposition of the Mandalorian. But it comes right after she mentions that the Darksaber was forged by someone who was both a Mandalorian and a Jedi. Right. And so while I think that Din is very naive, I think that he listens, and I think that he, burrowed that little kernel away, and he's like, he can wield the Darksaber. Yeah. Like, I'm going to give it to Grogu. Like, he's going to have Mandalorian armor now. Like, very clear setup there for something. I also think we're going to see Luke next week. So
what?
I do. I think that's
Luke.
I think our Dream Avengers team up is going to happen.
Laura, what do you think?
I'm gonna interject because I feel like when he says I need to see a friend. First, I feel like we're gonna see that in The Mandalorian. I don't think we're gonna see that in Boba Fett. I feel like that's like for us a tease for us that for The Mandalorian. So I feel like he's gonna go, and then it's good for the next episode. It's gonna be Boba Fett, and then The Mandalorian comes back because I feel like we don't want this to be The Mandalorian. We already have a show for The Mandalorian. We had one whole episode for The Mandalorian. So I feel like they just wanted to tease, like, oh, we gotta watch the next season of Mandalorian so we could catch up, so he could see Grogu. Yeah. And then with the next episode, I feel like there's gonna be no Luke, no Grogu, just the Mandalorian coming back to help in the fight. Because I love the Mandalorian, I love this episode, but I just need this to be Boba Fett. I love Luke, I love Grogu, but I need this to be in the the Book of Boba Fett.
I need this to be the Mandalorian.
I need this to be the Book of Boba Fett. Yeah.
Real quick around the horn, what do you think the armor made for Grogu? I mean, because it looks like it fits in a small little package from that big spear. So what do you guys think that she made
little cups.
I think it's going to be like mithril. It looked like chain armor to me. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a little chain armor shirt.
Oh, that's true.
I have a problem though because they grow. The child, he's not going to be that size. Like we see Yoda, he's like bigger. So I'm like, he should have made it like something that could grow with him because you're going to have to get a new one anyway afterwards.
Maybe
I don't know. That's just my thing.
Expansion pack. Yeah, like add new chains. It was a long spear.
It was a big spear. It fit in a little tiny.
I'm gonna laugh if there's a little mask. It's a little mask he just puts on.
I love that the napkin was shaped like Grogu.
That was hilarious, right? Oh, And then, speaking of that, let's move on here. We make a complete switch from this very serious situation here, these conversations, this battle for supremacy here, and poor Paz Vizsla, who can't even uphold his house's honor there to try to win that saber back. Clearly, this is the Mandalorians. It's going to be something carries in to season 3, as you all have mentioned already. So it's going to be exciting to see how this affects his relationship with Bo-Katan, because some kind of battle is coming down the road between those two. But we switch from this very serious thing into a much more relaxed, comical approach here that I thought really worked. We get him bordering the commercial ship. We have that droid there that I think is from Star Tours or one of these places, more having to check his weapons, which was a very funny scene that we've seen in how many action movies over the years, funny action movies where they're taking off all their weapons, puts it in the case, says, hey, I know what's in here. Then we see him have a little back and forth with a young Rodian on that commercial freighter, and he lands on Mos Eisley to reunite with Peli Motto. She offers him a ship that replaces the Razor Crest for now. The ship is an N1 starfighter that was commissioned by the Queen of Naboo. They built it together. She soups it up real nice. I tweeted this morning. I got Grease Lightning vibes from this. He gets to know the Jawa a bit more, which I put might come in handy down the road, either in season 3 or with the Book of Boba Fett. We find out that Peli dated a Jawa. Where is that series? Give me that series. And finally, we roll out the ship. He takes it for a test drive. He's stopped by 2 X-Wing fighters, with one of them being piloted by Carson Teva. So nice to see him come back here. He recognizes Mando's voice, starts to question him about the Razor Crest and some Imperial remnants on Navarro, but Mando takes off before they can finish questioning him, as a rebel does. He ends up back at Peli Motto's, where Fennec Shand seeks his help to join her and Boba Fett in their fight. He agrees to help, quote, on the house, but has to pay a visit to a little friend. So that's the end of the episode, but let's deal with this large section here, Dan. There is so much humor and comedy that's lightly touched on throughout this section that could have easily fallen apart, could have been cheesy, could have been not good. But for me, I thought it really worked. And that, of course, speaks volumes to Pedro Pascal's performance and voiceover wise, but also what Amy Sedaris does. And we get kind of living in this world. But these Phantom Menace references, they're basically saying the Phantom Menace, we are gonna revive it. We are gonna give it absolution, redemption, and have it be a cool part of this episode. What did you think of this whole approach to this sequence here, and the humor and Peli Motto and all the stuff with the Jawa as well?
I mean, this is what I kind of realized, that we're not getting to Boba this episode, are we?
Yeah.
When we have like a 5-minute stretch about checking your luggage and, finding your seat on a plane, essentially. Mara, when we were watching, said it's so hilarious to think of Mando taking the equivalent of Southwest.
Yeah.
Which is basically what he did.
It's right.
I thought they were just setting out something where he gets there and the Darksaber's gone. Part of me is just like, would Mando really willingly surrender every single weapon on his body? Whatever. But yeah, I mean, we have this, it's like I was talking about last week, the idea of unifying all of the known Star Wars universe. And even in this episode, we have Clone Wars stuff, we have prequel stuff, we have original trilogy stuff, even getting into, the New Republic that we see in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
And so it's just more of that. It's a pretty cool ship. I was thinking like, oh, wow, man, they're going to sell a lot of Legos of that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of Lego sets for that ship.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so ready.
Hot Wheels.
Exactly. So I think that, again, this to me was more of just like, this is when I was like, oh, this is just totally an episode of The Mandalorian, because it's all souping up this ship and flying it through Becker's Canyon and all this stuff. And again, I thought it was really cool, just on a Star Wars level, on a fan level, for seeing all of this, because it's the most relaxed I think we've been around Den in a long time, where everything's not just driven by action and getting here, getting there, fighting this person, or redeeming. It's literally just like, what happens to Den when he needs a new ship? And Amy Sedaris, I thought, was really funny. I mean, it was just sort of hanging out with Mando for the second half of this episode. And other than again, the name of the title of the show in front of it, I didn't have any problems with that.
Yeah. What about the ending moment there with Fennec Shand and him? As Maggie mentioned earlier, most relaxed we've seen Fennec Shand through the entire series of the Book of Boba Fett.
I mean, listen, if if you got the chance to go be around people instead of being in, Jabba's House of Horrors with the Rancor, I'd probably be happy too. She probably went and had a nice meal, got a drink, maybe saw some old friends. Of course she's in a good mood. Who wouldn't be?
That's a fair point. Laura, what do you think about this whole sequence, this turn into a little bit of the comedic humor approach to Star Wars, which they have tried in the first 4 episodes of Boba Fett, and some people have really hated it and commented on all over social media, but I thought it worked really well in the parameters of The Mandalorian.
Well, I think if you have Amy Sedaris in any capacity on your show, it's going to be a lot of levity, a lot of like humor brought into the show. Even if you brought her into the Book of Boba Fett and no Mando, she's gonna bring that level, and it just depends on who you have. Like that's why I feel like Matt Berry is a waste of Matt Berry, because he could just pull off anything. So if you have the robot being funny, being Matt Berry, then I feel like that works. And then Amy Sedaris, like she's just Amy Sedaris, like so she brings so much to Paley, and I mean she brought it. Like I think if people who haven't watched Mandalorian, which the Venn diagram, I think that's really small. Like they're gonna fall in love with her. I want a Pelly show, or at least shorts of her interacting with her droids. But I felt like I love that scene with her. Like usually I think I would be like, oh okay, it's like just like it's a fun scenes for like because filler. I don't believe in fillers, but because I think everything adds, but like fillers. But I really enjoyed it because you get to see a different side of the Mando, and we get to see her. Because I love her, and we get to see little like snippets of. It felt like a lot of fan service. We saw BD. We saw it was a lot of Easter eggs for us, and I felt like it gave me so much joy to see that. And I think we as fans we relish in like little snippets of Easter eggs. But yeah, I love that scene. I love the comedy it brought. The Jawas. I got to see a different side of the Jawas being hairy. And also, it's great to see Paul Seong-Hong Lee again as Carson Teva, because I love him to death. But yeah, overall, like I just felt like it was a lot of fan service. Wizard, like the some of the terms. It felt like it was a lot of fan service, but I didn't hate it. Like I loved it. Like I absolutely loved it because I needed that. And I think that's what I've been waiting for Easter eggs a lot more Easter eggs to pop up in the Book of Boba Fett. So the fact that this gave me a whole bunch of it, I just felt so good to have that. But yeah, and Fennec Shan, I think she was more relaxed because I feel like she knows the Mandalorian's a good warrior to join their team. So I feel like she was just like, okay, and I know if we have him on our side, we're gonna be able to fight this group, the Pikes. Right. So I feel like that's why she was just like, yep, are you down for a job? Because she knows like this guy is a good fighter. It's a good warrior to have on their side. So I feel like that's why she's like, okay, I'm just here. Like, and then the fact that he gave her the money back, she's like, okay, I have money for me. So I enjoy the whole sequence. It was actually my favorite. And it made me realize, yeah, it's going to be the Mandalorian episode. But part of me was like, oh, it's a Mandalorian episode. But part of me was like, I don't care. I love him. I love everything about this. So yeah, so that's my
Shut up, brain. Let me enjoy this.
Like, oh, the Boba Fett. Like, oh, I love this. I love it so much.
Oh, what is that meme? Friendship with Boba Fett ended. I'm only friends with the Mandalorian.
But Megan, what did you think about this sequence? Did you like the turn into the humor? Did you like? I mean, we did get a little bit more of the Pike situation. Pelimoto certainly speaks about it. We get her kind of helping him soup up this ship. And look, I will flat out tell you, I do not like the prequels. It's not my jam. There are scenes that I enjoy, but I tried to watch Phantom Menace last year, and I could not make it through the first 30 minutes. It's just too much of it bothers me that I can't. But this is a great way to bring elements of the prequels that I did enjoy. Seeing this fighter get souped up. This is something, as Dan mentioned, we've seen in The Mandalorian, him putting together his ship. I have spoken, that dude helping him with his ship, all this stuff. Getting to know the Jawa a little bit more. Didn't he remember them from when he fell off their freighter? It seemed odd that he still needed information about the Jawa or was curious about how they worked. What did you think about this twist and this turn here into this a little bit more of the humorous approach? Did it work for you? And were you surprised that we didn't see Boba at all and we got only Fennec Shan as a connection to Boba?
I can't say that I'm surprised that we didn't see Boba. As the episode reached that midway point, I was like, yeah, he's not going to show up. It's going to be like Fennec or somebody, like one of the mod squad who's going to come and be like, hey, you're being called. I love the humor. I love when Star Wars is like weird and it's like, yeah, the Jawas date. Like, love that so much. I'm here for that. It hurts me a little bit that you don't like the prequels, which is fine. I know plenty of people who don't. That was my first introduction into Star Wars. I was 6 years old when the Phantom Menace came out as a child. I have a whole side of my shelf where I've been embracing my love for the prequels and finding like vintage toys and stuff that like is hard to find. And so when they walked into Pelly's like car lot and it was the Starfighter, I cried again. Because for me, I don't mind nostalgia. Like I know a lot of people get mad at like Star Wars really playing to nostalgia, but I do get frustrated that Tatooine feels like a relic for the original trilogy, and they kind of avoid kind of ever talking about the connections for the prequels. And to have the prequels so heavily acknowledged in this, and to have it be like, hey, do you remember pod racing? Do you remember Wizard? Do you remember like Naboo? It just brought me so much joy. And I was like, see, like, play to all the nostalgia. Don't just focus on the original trilogy. The prequels exist. Play with them some. And it brought me a lot of joy because I think it was fun nostalgia. It wasn't like super heavy handed. You know, we didn't see any of the typical things. It was fun stuff that isn't overplayed. And I just love Pelimoto so much. Her humor is so good. Their bantering was so good. I also love the idea that like, Din's kid is off to college, so he's gotten himself a hot rod that he's fixing up at the local car shop. Like, loved it. Love that he has like his own built-in the mask that you use when you're wielding. Love that's like built in for him. Love the droids. I really want to know if we're going to get follow through with him maybe getting his own astromech, because it's brought up, it's mentioned. It's right there. Or is that a little port for Grogu to sit in and watch the stars?
It's possible too.
But like, how cute would it be if Den took the BD unit? Like, how cute would that be? Like, I want Grogu and BD to be friends. I think it worked really well. I thought it was really refreshing. It would have been nice, obviously, if this had been like The Mandalorian and not in the middle of the Book of Boba Fett. But ultimately, I'm hoping it all is giving us information. Because I remember in The Mandalorian, I thought the Frog Lady episode was useless.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is fine. But then I saw when we reached the finale of that season that he learned from Frog Lady what parents are willing to do for their kids and how the great lengths that you'll go to, even like taking off your helmets. And so I think that this will ultimately have that connection that might surprise us. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Who knew Pelly could speak Jawa? That was something I did not see coming.
Can we rally? Because like we know now that they have a thing with the pikes of like stealing stuff from them. So can they just go steal stuff off their bikes so they have no weapons?
Yeah, I think it's going to pay dividends. The Jawa connection here is going, especially when Din Djarin threw a bag of money at him, much to Pelimoto's disdain. That was there, so it could be essential. It could be helpful down the road. There were a number of Easter eggs throughout this episode. You guys have already kind of mentioned a lot of them here. So let's veer off of that, unless there's one that you guys want to really point out that is really important to you all that we didn't touch on at all. Have you guys got any Easter eggs that you want to make sure we highlight? Okay. All right. So let me move to this point. So Dan, this episode ends. Do you think this was a thing where they wrote, look, we've got 6 episodes here. How do we make a 7th? Well, let's do both. Let's reintroduce The Mandalorian. Let's get people excited about season 3 of The Mandalorian, which is coming down the road here soon. And also kind of make it connect to the Book of Boba Fett. And that way we don't have to spend too much time in the world of the Book of Boba Fett. Do you think this was the idea? Do you think this was shot before they shot Book of Boba Fett? Or do you think this was the plan all along to have this episode here to kind of be a palate cleanser before we get into these last two episodes that are essentially going to serve as a season finale?
Well, I mean, this is one thing I've noticed, particularly in the era of Disney Plus, and it's not something I am an especially big fan of, but we're seeing it more and more in the Marvel films, the TV shows, and in this as well, where every individual project is also just enough of a piece of the next one that you need to see it to fully understand what's going on. Whether that's Julia Louis-Dreyfus popping up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then now she's in the movie, and you have to understand at the end of Black Widow to understand that you have to have seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And it looks like there may be some ties to What If and Doctor Strange. There's definitely ties to WandaVision and Doctor Strange.
Yes.
I feel like there is a corporate, probably corporate encouragement to make sure that every show has to tie into the other shows, so that you have to feel obligated to watch all of these things in order to get them. And that's the downside of unifying all of Star Wars. So I think that there was probably an encouragement to say, like, well, you should probably have Mando in at least one episode because we want to keep that ball in the air. But obviously Jon Favreau, who wrote this episode, is closely tied to Mando. That's literally like his show. So I think that it was probably a mix of like a corporate encouragement to keep Mando involved in this show, so that if you're a Mandalorian fan now, if you weren't watching the Boba Fett show, guess what? Now you have to. I think that that's part of what they're doing with Disney Plus and trying to get everybody to watch. There's a plus side to that, and there's a minus side to that. But it was well executed. It didn't feel cheap, which is good. That's the thing. That's the worst case scenario, is if it feels cheap and maybe that's why it was the whole episode. So it didn't feel like, oh, well, they just had Mando in the show just to have Mando. It did provide an important plot piece for Den and for his character. And it wasn't just him going like, hello, and then that's it. So, I have mixed feelings on all of it. It's just that, it's where the real world and art smash into each other, and it's a beautiful explosion.
I take your point absolutely, Dan. I mean, if it had been shoved in or felt like they were just exploiting the Mandalorian to kind of get people on this thing, I could totally get it. But this has been happening, I'm sure you know that too, Dan and Maggie and Laura, on the comic book side of things, when they make those runs and you've got to buy all these titles that you would never buy normally. I mean, I'd only bought Alpha Flight when they were connected to something else, or Cloak and Dagger when they were connected to Secret Wars. I never bought those separately unless they were connected to a larger story. So yes, there's a good and bad side to that for sure. You make
caution though, to be fair though, or just to the other side of that, that's literally what made me stop collecting comics.
No, really?
In the 90s. No, it was because it got to
this.
a point where you couldn't read one title. You had to read 8 titles, and it was expensive and a lot of time. And like when they started doing all of that is when, as a comic collector, I stopped collecting them month to month. And so a word of caution to Disney there. You can overdo it. You can overdo it.
Yeah. I mean, back when they were 75 cents, it was fine. Now that they're $5 a comic, I can't do that. Yeah. Maggie, thoughts on this episode? Did you feel that it fit within the realm of the Book of Boba Fett? Did you feel that it was a nice episode to have, a palate cleanser? Or did you have maybe a little bit of issues here with how they constructed this episode in the run of this series?
I think that I probably have less issues with it than everyone else here in this chat, just because I try to be, after the Frog Lady thing, where I was so down on that and it paid off so well, I've tried to not be as hard on episodes that feel slightly out of place. I might also be in the minority in thinking that this wasn't just a teaser for The Mandalorian season 3, that this is going to play out in the next 2 episodes as well. I still very firmly believe that we're going to see Grogu. It would be nice if they had a Force user show up to help them with the pikes. I think that would deliver some extra muscle. And I also just can't believe that Din is going to be their only muscle. He is just one man who cannot wield the dark saber or anything. So he might seem like he's a good backup, but is he? And I think it's so funny. I never cared about Luke before. And then that final episode of Mandalorian, I now have Luke figures on my shelf. I don't know who I've become, but I'm like, yeah, I want to see Luke again. I would love to see that connection and, see some of this Tatooine connection further. I mean, we're on Tatooine. Why not bring him back? We've already seen, Cammy and everybody too. So there's a lot of potential there for just some fun connectivity, some of that corporate synergy going on with the characters. And I don't know. I'm really excited. I love this episode. Really happy that it was a 15-minute episode, that we got a lot of good meat, pun intended, from this episode, and I hope that we keep that link for the next 2 episodes as well, so that we can get some good Boba content, so that we can neatly finish out this story and play through that.
You should see my reaction at 12:30 in the morning when there's 51 minutes. What? No!
Oh yeah, I was screaming the whole time. I was like,
This is going to be a lot. Let's make a deal, Maggie. We won't come after the prequels if you prequel people don't come after Luke. Let's make a deal.
I'm
We
fine with
love
that.
Luke. Don't hate Luke.
No, and I love him now. Like, I never thought I would have bought Luke stuff. I much preferred Han Solo. That was my thing. I thought
Of
Han
course.
was much cooler.
Everyone prefers
Indiana
him.
Jones fan, so Han Solo,
course.
right up my alley.
Get it. She was my wife. All right, Laura, talk to me about what you think about this episode and final thoughts here overall and how it fit in the construct of the Book of Boba Fett as a series here.
Wait, is this for me or
Yeah.
and
Sorry,
okay?
Laura,
Yes, I overall like I know I keep reiterating. I'm like, oh, it's Book of Boba Fett, but I'm like, F it. I love Mandalorian. I love this episode. Everything about it was perfect in like finding out with Mandalorian, and of course this was all filmed way before. Like this was all filmed before like the Boba Fett premiered. So I need people to understand that this was this is planned out beforehand, because I know there's going to be naysayers like this is how it should have been done, and they know, and I'm like, no, this was done beforehand. It's part of the story. It's gonna make sense, because I feel like everything, like the flashbacks and everything, will make sense. So I feel like this whole episode, yes, it's a little bit of like it's kind of like a exposition for Mandalorian for people, and it gave history for us of Mandalore. But I feel like it's all going to come back. Like I feel like that Starfighter is going to be part of the fight. I feel like the droids and Paley is going to be part of the fight. I feel like it's all going to come back to the Book of Boba Fett, and that's what my hope is. And I don't want more Mando scenes for the next 2 episodes, because I just want to focus on Boba Fett, because this story needs to grow in order for it to have like a base, like it has to have a good base before we can expand it even more. And so if you lose people like in the next 2 episodes, people are just gonna be like, oh, the Book of Boba Fett, I'm just gonna watch the Mandalorian, and like the Book of Boba Fett is not the Boba Fett I wanted. Mandalorian's ruthless and all this stuff, and I want people to know that Boba Fett has a base, and then he just grows it as a diamond. And so overall, just the episode in general, I appreciated it. I love the humor. I brought so much joy to see Amy Sedaris. It just and the Easter eggs. I usually like Maggie. It's like the prequels. I like the prequels, like some of the prequels, and like the aspects of it too. Because we were young, like we grew with that, and so I appreciated that it made everything. It kind of shows like, the prequels, like Wizard, like all that stuff. So I really appreciate that. But overall, the episode, I'm satisfied as a fan. I'm weary as a Book of Boba Fett fan, but I am happy as a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, fair enough. As Laura says, and Megan Trainor used to say, it's all about that base. All right, so I enjoyed this episode. Time with this episode, it was great to see the Mandalorian. To me, it didn't take away too much from the Book of Boba Fett, because we got that connection at the end, and it was nice to take a little bit of a break and enjoy an episode where we didn't have to tear it apart or wonder if they're getting Boba Fett right. It was just nice to take a little bit of a break from that, and now we've got this great groundwork for Din Djarin that we're going to see how he's going to play into the overall approach here for these last 2 episodes, and how he's going to play in episode 3, in season 3 for the Mandalorian as well. Great references to the Phantom Menace, to A New Hope, to Grease, to Armageddon for me when they're throwing out the ice cream scoop, the Fast and the Furious, building the car, even Elysium, that planet that they were on, felt very much like Elysium, and any Gladiator film, of course, I mentioned the Terminators, and Star Wars Easter eggs galore for any fan to enjoy. So good stuff. Well, let us know what you thought of the episode down in the comment section below as well. Like this video, share this video, get people to subscribe to the Hollywood Critics Association. We do a lot of these reviews now. We got more coming, more of these after shows coming for sure. And I want to thank my 3 panelists who joined me today for sure. Laura, where can they find you and everything you got going on?
I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Laura Sirikul. I write for a whole bunch of places, so I always tweet where I'm writing. But yes, you'll see, if you look now, you'll see a mixture of my reaction to the Book of Boba Fett and BTS. But yeah, the Book of Boba Fett right now. So yes, so you'll see my reaction to the Book of Boba Fett. I'm just screaming the whole time, like okay, that's all you'll see right now.
Right. All the BTS content at Twitter for sure. Maggie, where can they find you and everything that's going on?
You can find me on Twitter at Maggie of the Town, where I have a link tree in my bio for all of my various pursuits, because I'm a very busy person, just like Din Djarin.
Nice.
Hey, that's appropriate.
I like that. Danny, please.
At Murrell Dan on Twitter, youtube.com/Dan Murrell Movies. I am squeezing in one last Sundance movie this morning, and then I'm going to start to work on a video recapping my favorites of the festival. And then there's a bunch of reviews. I have one of my favorite double features ever coming up next week: Moonfall and Jackass Forever.
Incredible.
That's just going to be.
Oh my God.
Mwah.
Yeah.
Movie reviews, news. I'm going to be reviewing the whole Boba Fett season once it wraps up here in a couple weeks. But all that over on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, screenings are coming. Yeah, I got those next week as well as Death on the Nile, which I'm looking forward to seeing if that's going to be any good next week. We shall see. You can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram and on TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, and then my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. All right, we're out of here. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Have a Mando day. And we'll talk to you next time on another brand new episode here from the Hollywood Critics Association, the Book of Boba Fett Aftershow. Peace.